King Teo stood by the tall glass window of the royal tower. His scaled hands were clasped behind his back as he looked out at the 3 moons of his world. The smallest moon glowed red tonight. A bad sign, the old ones would say. "You are certain?" he asked without turning. The royal doctor bowed low, even though the king could not see him. "Yes, your majesty. We have tested Princess Juwu 7 times. The results are always the same." King Teo finally turned. His gem-like eyes shone with a hard light. "Explain it again. Use simple words." The doctor swallowed hard. "Princess Juwu has a rare change in her body. Her eggs cannot join with any Kirin male seed. She cannot have children with our kind." "She is broken, then," King Tahoe said coldly. "Not broken, your majesty. Just different. The change in her body is rare, but not unknown. In the past, such females would take other roles in society. They would become— I know what they would become," the king snapped. "Advisors, teachers, but not queens." He walked to his throne and sat heavily. "And so the royal line of Tahoe ends with me." Outside the throne room, Princess Juwu pressed her ear against the cold metal door. Tears ran down her face, making the small scales on her cheeks shimmer. She had known what the tests would show, but hearing her father speak of her this way hurt more than she had expected. "Princess," a voice whispered sharply, "you should not be here." Juwu turned to see Minji, her personal servant. "They are talking about me, Minji. I have a right to hear." "Come away," Minji urged. "What good will it do to hear such hard words?" Juwu allowed herself to be led back to her rooms. The palace was quiet tonight. Most of the court had gone to watch the triple moon rise from the southern gardens. No one had invited Juwu. In her room, Juwu sat at her window. Like her father, she stared at the moons. "What will happen to me now?" she asked softly. Minji began to brush Juwu's long, dark hair. "Nothing bad, princess. You are still the king's daughter." "A useless daughter," Juwu said. "I was born to continue the royal line. Now I cannot do even that simple thing." "There is more to life than having children," Minji said firmly. "Not for a princess." Juwu touched the royal mark on her wrist, a pattern of scales that showed her bloodline. "Father will have to choose a new heir now. Probably cousin Junseo. He has always wanted the throne." Minji made a disapproving sound. "That man is not fit to rule. He thinks only of himself." A soft chime rang through the palace, making both women look up. "The humans," Juwu said, suddenly interested. They must have arrived early. The human delegation was not due until tomorrow. They were coming to talk about peace after years of tense relations between their worlds. The Kirin had superior technology, but the humans had surprising skills in war. Neither side wanted to fight, but neither trusted the other fully. "Do you think they really look like the pictures?" Minji asked. "No scales at all. Just soft skin like babies." Juwu shrugged. "I will see tomorrow at the formal greeting." "Will you attend?" Minji asked carefully. "After today's news." "Of course," Juwu said, lifting her chin. "I am still a princess. Father cannot hide me away just because I am Barren." The word tasted bitter in her mouth. That night, Juwu could not sleep. She kept thinking about her future, empty of purpose now. No Kirin would choose her as a mate, knowing she could not have children. Her father would find some quiet role for her, away from the court's gossip. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Juwu made a decision. If she could not be the princess everyone wanted, she would be the princess she chose to be. Starting tomorrow, when the humans arrived, she would make her own path. She did not know then how that path would change everything. For her father, and for both their worlds. The grand hall of the Kirin Palace shone with bright lights. King Tahoe sat on his throne, his scaled skin catching the light and throwing back small rainbows. Princess Juwu stood to his right, dressed in her finest robes. She held her head high despite the whispers that followed her now. The human delegation approaches, called the royal announcer. All eyes turned to the great doors as they swung open. 5 humans walked in, looking small next to the tall Kirin guards. The Kirin people watched with curious eyes. Humans were rare on their world. At the front of the group walked a man with straight shoulders and a calm face. This was Captain Hyun, the leader of the humans. His skin was tan and smooth, with no scales at all. His eyes were dark and round, not like the bright, jewel-shaped eyes of the Kirin. "Welcome to Kirin Prime," King Tahoe said in a loud voice. "I am King Tahoe, ruler of the Kirin Empire." Captain Hyun bowed low. "Thank you for your welcome, Your Majesty. We bring greetings from Earth and hope for peace between our worlds." Juwu watched the human with interest. She had seen pictures, but never a real human. They looked so soft, like they would bruise from a simple touch. Yet this Captain Hyun stood tall, meeting her father's gaze without fear. "This is my daughter, Princess Juwu," King Tahoe said, waving a hand toward her. Juwu stepped forward and nodded her head. Captain Hyun looked at her and smiled. His smile was warm and reached his eyes. Juwu found herself smiling back. "An honor, Princess," Captain Hyun said. After the formal greetings, the court moved to the feast hall. Juwu found herself seated near the humans. She listened as they talked about Earth and their journey. "Your buildings are amazing," said one of the human women. "So tall and made of crystal. We have nothing like this on Earth." "But they're so cold," said another human. "Don't you Kirin ever want something warmer, more comfortable?" Captain Hyun cut in quickly. "The Kirin have different needs than humans. Their homes suit their bodies perfectly." He looked at Juwu. "Isn't that right, Princess?" "Yes," Juwu said, surprised that the human understood. "Our scales keep us warm, so we like cool spaces, and the crystal buildings catch the light from our 3 moons. "I would love to see the 3 moons together," Captain Hyun said. "On Earth, we have only one. They rise together in 3 days," Juwu said. "Perhaps you will see them then." King Tahoe watched his daughter talking with the human. His eyes narrowed. He did not like how easily she spoke with the alien. But the peace talks were important. He would not make trouble now. Over the next few days, the humans and Kirin met many times. They talked about trade, about space travel, and about how to share the stars without fighting. Juwu went to all these meetings. She spoke well and showed she knew much about Kirin laws. Captain Hyun often looked to her when he did not understand something. One evening, Juwu walked in the royal gardens. The smallest moon was rising, casting red light over the strange Kirin plants. She heard footsteps and turned to see Captain Hyun. "Princess," he said with a small bow. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," Juwu said. "Do you like our gardens?" "They're beautiful," he said, looking at a tall blue plant that seemed to glow. "Everything here is beautiful." Juwu felt her face grow warm. No one had spoken to her so freely in many days, not since the news about her condition had spread. "Some of the other humans don't seem to like our ways," Juwu said. "They don't understand," Captain Hyun replied. "It's hard to accept things that are different, but I find your world fascinating." Juwu smiled. "Would you like me to show you more of it? Tomorrow, perhaps." Captain Hyun's eyes lit up. "I would be honored, Princess." From a window above, King Tahoe watched them talk. His face was hard with worry. He did not trust these humans, and he did not like how his daughter looked at this Captain Hyun. "Watch them closely," he told his guard Sunwoo. "I want to know everything they say to each other." Sunwoo bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." But neither the king nor Sunwoo knew what was about to begin, something that would change their world forever. The royal gardens were quiet in the morning light. Princess Juwu led Captain Hyun down a path lined with tall blue plants that moved slightly even when there was no wind. "These are breath flowers," Juwu explained. "They take in bad air and give out good air. Like your earth trees, but faster." Captain Hyun reached out to touch one. then stopped and looked at Ju. "May I?" She nodded. "They will not hurt you." His fingers gently touched the blue petals. The flower turned toward his hand like it was alive. "Amazing," he said softly. Sunwoo, the royal guard, watched from a distance. He had been following them since they entered the gardens. King Tahoe had ordered him to listen to everything they said. Juwoo led Hyun to a quiet spot with a stone bench. All around them, strange plants grew in many colors. The 3 moons could be seen faintly in the morning sky. "Captain Hyun," Juwoo said after they sat down, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, princess, and please, just call me Hyun." Juwoo looked down at her hands. "To humans, is having children very important to humans?" Hyun looked surprised by the question. "It depends on the person. Some humans want many children. Others choose to have none. And this is accepted. Those who don't have children." "Yes," Hyun said. "There are many ways to live a good life." Juwoo was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I cannot have children. At least, not with any Kirin male." Hyun's face showed concern but not pity. Juwoo was glad for that. "My body has a rare change," she continued. "I am what our people call Barren. This is why my father is cold to me now. I cannot continue the royal line." "I'm sorry," Hyun said. "That must be very hard." "It is our way," Juwoo said. "The royal family must have heirs." Hyun looked thoughtful. "You said you cannot have children with Kirin males. But what about other species?" Juwoo's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "On Earth, different animal species cannot usually have babies together, but sometimes very close species can. Has anyone ever tested if Kirin and humans might be compatible?" Juwoo stood up quickly. That is not something we talk about." "I'm sorry," Hyun said. "I didn't mean to upset you." "No, it's—" Juwoo looked around to make sure no one was close. Sunwoo was too far to hear. "No one has ever suggested such a thing. It would be revolutionary," Hyun suggested. "Forbidden," Juwoo whispered. But the idea had taken root in her mind. Could it be possible? Unknown to both of them, a similar idea had already occurred to someone else. In his lab deep in the palace, royal scientist Dojin was studying samples from the human visitors. King Tahoe had ordered him to learn everything about human biology. Dojin looked at the screen showing human DNA next to Kirin DNA. There were differences, yes, but also surprising similarities. "Impossible," he muttered to himself. But the more he looked, the more he wondered. That night, Juwoo could not sleep. She kept thinking about what Hyun had said. Was it really possible? Could a Kirin and a human have a child together? The thought both excited and scared her. If it was true, then she was not truly barren. But to have a child with a human, her father would never accept it. In the following days, Juwoo and Hyun met often. They talked about their worlds, their customs, their lives. Each meeting made them closer. Sunwoo watched them always, but he began to stay farther away. He had known Juwoo since she was small. He had never seen her smile so much as she did with the human. In his lab, Dojin ran more tests. His findings shocked him. There was a real chance that Kirin and human DNA could combine, but he kept this knowledge to himself. Such information in the wrong hands could cause great trouble. What none of them knew was how their separate paths would soon come together and change everything. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived. The peace talks moved slowly. Each side wanted things the other would not give. Princess Juwoo no longer attended all the meetings. Instead, she and Captain Hyun met in quiet corners of the palace. They talked for hours about their worlds and their lives. Each day, they grew closer. "The talks are not going well," Hyun told her one evening as they walked in a small garden few people visited. "Your father wants too many promises from us. He does not trust easily," Juwoo said. "Especially now, because of the succession problem." Juwoo nodded. Her barren status was not talked about openly, but everyone knew. He fears looking weak to other Kirin leaders. Hyun took her hand. His skin felt warm against her cooler scales. You are not a problem. Ju-woo, you are a wonderful person. Ju-woo looked at their joined hands. No Kirin male had touched her since the news spread. They acted like her condition might spread to them. But Hyun was not afraid. I have been thinking about what you said, she said softly. About Kirin and humans being compatible. Hyun's eyes widened. And I want to know if it's true. Meanwhile, in his lab, Dojin stared at his test results in amazement. He had been testing human and Kirin cells together for days. The results were clear. Human and Kirin DNA could combine. In theory, they could have children together. A knock at his door made him jump. He quickly covered his work. Enter, he called. Princess Ju-woo stepped into the lab. She looked nervous. Princess, Dojin bowed low. How may I serve you? I need your help, Dojin, she said. And your silence. Dojin had served the royal family for many years. He had known Ju-woo since she was born. What do you need, princess? I need to know if I could have a child with a human. Dojin's mouth fell open. He looked at his covered work, then back at Ju-woo. Slowly, he walked to the door and locked it. Princess, he said quietly, how did you come to ask this question? Captain Hyun suggested it might be possible, she said. I need to know. Dojin took a deep breath. What I am about to tell you must not leave this room. He uncovered his work and showed her the test results. It is possible. Not certain, but possible. Ju's heart beat faster. So I am not truly barren. Not with humans, it seems, Dojin said. But princess, you must understand what this means. A human Kirin child would be the first of its kind. It would change everything. I know, she whispered. That night, Ju sent a message to Hyun, asking him to meet her in the old tower of the palace. It was a place rarely used now. Sunwoo saw the message being delivered. He should tell the king. That was his duty. But he had seen the sadness in Ju's eyes for years. And in recent days, he had seen that sadness lift when she was with the human. He decided to say nothing, but to follow and watch. When Hyun arrived at the tower, Ju was waiting. She told him what Dojin had discovered. So it really is possible, Hyun said, amazed. Yes, Ju said, but what does it mean for us? Hyun took her hands in his. It means whatever we want it to mean. My father would never accept it, Ju said. A human Kirin child. Do you care what he thinks? Hyun asked. Or do you care what your heart tells you? Ju looked into his eyes. I care about you, she said softly. These past weeks have shown me that. And I care about you, Hyun said. More than I should, as a diplomat. They moved closer to each other. Sunwoo watched from the shadows. He should stop this. It was his duty. But he did not move. What happens now? Ju asked. That's for us to decide, Hyun said. Together. As they embraced, Sunwoo turned away. He had made his choice. He would protect their secret, even from the king. None of them knew how soon that secret would be tested, or how it would change the fate of two worlds. 2 months passed. The peace talks were nearly done. Soon the humans would leave Kirin Prime and return to Earth. Princess Ju stood in her private room, looking at herself in the mirror. She placed a hand on her stomach. Something was different. She had been feeling strange for weeks now, tired in the mornings, hungry at odd times. Could it be? She whispered to herself. A knock at her door made her jump. It was Minji, her servant. Princess, the king wishes to see you right away, Minji said. Ju found her father in the throne room with his advisors. His face was hard and cold. The peace treaty is complete, King Taho announced. The humans will leave tomorrow. Ju felt her heart sink. So soon. I thought they would stay another week. The king's eyes narrowed. Why would that matter to you? I have been helping them understand our ways, Ju said quickly. Yes, I've heard how helpful you've been to Captain Hyun, the king said. His voice was sharp. Too helpful, perhaps. Juwoo's face grew hot. Did he know about her and Hyun? The humans have what they came for, the king continued. Now they will go. And you, daughter, will not see Captain Hyun again before he leaves. Father, I must speak with him, Ju said, trying to stay calm. Why? The king demanded. What could you possibly need to tell him? Ju opened her mouth, then closed it. She could not tell her father her suspicions here, in front of everyone. It's a matter of diplomatic courtesy, she said. The king laughed without humor. No, daughter. I have watched you with this human. I know there is more. It ends now. Later that day, Ju tried to find Hyun, but guards blocked her way. The king's orders, they said. Desperate, she went to find Dojin in his lab. I need your help, she told the scientist. I think I might be with child. Dojin's eyes widened. He quickly ran tests. As they waited for results, Ju paced the room. If it's true, she said, I must tell Hyun before he leaves. The king has ordered that no one speak with the humans before they depart, Dojin said. He suspects something between you and Captain Hyun. The test results appeared on Dojin's screen. He stared at them in amazement. Princess, he said, his voice shaking. You are pregnant. It has happened. A human Kirin child grows within you. Ju sat down hard, her legs suddenly weak. Joy and fear filled her heart in equal measure. I must tell Hyun, she said. And my father. He must know the truth. Be careful, Dojin warned. This news will shake the very foundation of our world. Ju went straight to her father's private chambers. The guards let her pass. She was still the princess, after all. Father, she said as she entered, I must speak with you about something important. King Taeho looked up from his work. What is it, daughter? Father, I am with child. The king stared at her. Then he laughed. Impossible. You are barren. The tests were clear. Barren with Kirin males, Ju said, but not with humans. The king's laughter stopped. His face turned dark with anger. What are you saying? Captain Hyun and I, we care for each other, and now I carry his child. Our child. Your grandchild. The king stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You lie. This is a trick to keep the human here. It's the truth, Ju said. Dojin has confirmed it. Dojin. The king's voice shook with rage. He knew of this abomination. Father, please, Ju begged. This child is a miracle. It proves our species can. Silence, the king roared. You have shamed me. Shamed our line. No princess of the Kirin has ever lain with an alien. The next morning, the humans left for Earth. Hyun tried to see Ju one last time, but was told she was not available. He had no choice but to leave with his team. That same day, King Taeho announced that Princess Ju would be going to the royal retreat in the mountains. For her health, he told the court. But everyone knew it was exile. Ju was taken away that very night, with only Minji allowed to accompany her. Dojin was ordered to go too, to monitor her condition. As the royal ship took off, Ju looked back at the palace, her home. When would she see it again? And would she ever see Hyun again? Sunwoo, watching the ship leave, felt guilt heavy in his heart. He should have warned them. Now it was too late. The royal retreat sat high in the mountains, far from the city. It was a beautiful place, with tall trees and clear streams. But to Princess Ju, it felt like a prison. 4 months had passed since she was sent away. Her body was changing. Her stomach grew round with the child inside her. How are you feeling today, princess? Dojin asked as he checked her health. Tired, Ju said, and the baby kicked all night. Dojin smiled. That's good. It means the child is strong. Minji brought in a tray with food. You must eat, princess. For the baby. Juwu nodded and took a piece of fruit. She had lost weight everywhere except her growing belly. Worry had taken away her appetite. Has there been any word? She asked. From my father, or from Earth? Dojin and Minji exchanged looks. No, princess, Dojin said. The king has ordered that no messages come to you or leave from you. Juwu's eyes filled with tears. Hyun doesn't even know about the baby. We've tried to send word, Minji said softly. But the king's guards watch all communications. Dojin looked at his medical tablet. The baby's growth is remarkable. Half Kirin, half human, yet developing normally. Will it look more human or more Kirin? Juwu asked. We won't know until the birth, Dojin said. But my tests show a mix of both species. That night, Juwu stood at her window, looking at the 3 moons. She wondered if Hyun could see Earth's single moon from wherever he was. I will find a way to tell you about our child, she whispered. I promise. As her pregnancy continued, Dojin became more and more excited by what he was seeing. This child, he told Juwu, is more than just a baby. It's proof that our species can evolve together. It could change everything we know about Kirin biology. My father doesn't see it that way, Juwu said sadly. The king is trapped in old ways of thinking, Dojin replied. But he cannot deny the truth forever. In her 7th month, Juwu had a dream. She saw Hyun holding a small child with slight scales on its skin. The child had Hyun's dark eyes but Juwu's silver hair. In the dream, they were happy, a family. She woke up crying. Princess, Minji was at her side instantly. Are you in pain? No, Juwu said, just missing what might have been. Time passed. The baby grew. Dojin's tests showed it was healthy and strong. It had features of both species, Kirin resilience, and human adaptability. The child will be able to live on either world, Dojin told her. Earth or Kirin Prime. It's remarkable. One night in her 9th month, Juwu felt a sharp pain. Then another. Dojin, she called. Minji, I think the baby is coming. The birth was long and difficult. Kirin births were usually easier, but this was something new. Juwu fought hard, hour after hour. You're doing well, Dojin encouraged her, just a little more. Finally, with one last push, the baby came into the world. Its first cry was strong and clear. A boy, Dojin said, amazement in his voice. You have a son, princess. Juwu reached for her baby. Dojin placed the small bundle in her arms. She looked down at her son's face and gasped. The baby had Hyun's features, his nose, his mouth, but there were faint scales at his temples, and when he opened his eyes, they were a mix of human brown and Kirin silver. He's perfect, Juwu whispered, a perfect mix of both of us. What will you name him? Minji asked, wiping tears from her eyes. Juwu thought for a moment. Juno, she said. His name is Chuno. Dojin examined the baby carefully. His vital signs are strong. All organs functioning normally. Princess, you have given birth to the first human Kirin child in history. Juwu held her son close. And not the last, I hope. What happens now? Minji asked. Now, Juwu said with new strength in her voice, we find a way to tell my father. And to tell Hyun. They both need to know about Chuno. Dojin nodded. The king cannot ignore this miracle forever. And your human captain has a right to know he has a son. As Juwu looked at her baby, she felt hope for the first time in months. This child would change everything. We'll find a way, she promised Chuno softly. Somehow, we'll bring your father back to you. 6 months passed quickly. Baby Juno grew stronger each day. He had Juwu's silver hair and small patches of scales on his temples and back. His eyes were a mix of human brown and Kirin silver that seemed to change in different lights. He grows faster than a human baby would, Dojin told Juwoo as he checked Shunho's health. But slower than a Kirin baby. He is truly a mix of both. Juwoo watched her son play with a toy Minji had made him. He could already sit up and was trying to crawl. She had never known such love as she felt for this small being. One morning, a royal ship landed at the retreat. Guards stepped out, led by Sunwoo. "Princess," Sunwoo bowed low. "I bring orders from the king. You are to return to the palace immediately." Juwoo's heart beat faster. Why now? After all this time. "The king has arranged a marriage for you," Sunwoo said, not meeting her eyes. "With your cousin Junseo. He has agreed to take you as his wife, despite your condition." "My condition?" Juwoo asked sharply. "Your barrenness," Sunwoo said uncomfortably. Juwoo laughed, a sound without joy. "I am not barren, Sunwoo. Look." She pointed to Juno, who was watching the visitor with curious eyes. Sunwoo stared at the baby. "Is that my son?" Juwoo said proudly. "Born 6 months ago." "The king said nothing about a child," Sunwoo said, shocked. "Because he doesn't know," Dojin said, stepping forward. "He has refused all our messages." Sunwoo looked at the baby again, noting his mixed features. "The human captain?" Juwoo nodded. "Captain Hyun is his father." Sunwoo took a deep breath. "Princess, you and your son must come with me. Those are my orders." The journey to the palace was tense. Juwoo held Juno close, worried about what would happen when her father saw him. "Will the king hurt the baby?" Minji whispered. "No," Juwoo said firmly. "He is my father, but this is his grandson. Royal blood flows in Shunho's veins. That means something to my father." The palace looked the same as when she had left. But Juwoo was not the same. She was a mother now, stronger and braver than before. Guards led her to the throne room. It was full of people. The royal court had gathered. All eyes turned to her as she entered. Then gasps filled the room as they saw the baby in her arms. King Taho sat on his throne. Beside him stood cousin Junseo, looking smug. The smug look died when he saw Shunho. "What is this?" the king demanded, rising from his throne. "What child is that?" Juwoo walked forward, head high. "This is your grandson, father. His name is Shunho." The king's face went pale. "Impossible. You are barren." "With Kirin males, yes," Juwoo said clearly, so all could hear, "but not with humans. This is Captain Hyun's son. And mine." Shocked whispers filled the room. Cousin Junseo's face twisted with disgust. "You expect me to marry her now?" he spat. "After she has bred with an alien." The king ignored him, his eyes fixed on Hyuno. The baby looked back at him without fear. "Bring it closer," the king ordered. "He is not an it," Juwoo said. "He is a he, your grandson." She stepped forward until she stood before the throne. Shunho reached out a small hand toward the king's shiny crown. "He has your eyes," Juwoo said softly, "when the light hits them just right." The king stared at the child. Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting. "This could be any baby," the king said finally, "with silver paint on its skin to look like scales." "Test him," Juwoo said. "Dojin can prove he is Kirin and human." The king nodded to Dojin. "Do it. Now." While they waited for test results, the court buzzed with talk. Some were horrified by the idea of a half-human child. Others were curious. A few seemed excited by the possibility. Dojin returned with a tablet. "The results are clear, Your Majesty. This child has both Kirin and human DNA. He is indeed your grandson." The king took the tablet and studied it. His face showed nothing. "And so," he said finally, looking at Juwoo, "you have done what was thought impossible." "Not impossible," Juwoo said. "Just never tried before." The king looked at Hyuno again. The baby stared back with eyes that matched his own. "What does this mean for our people?" the king asked. so quietly that only Juwu heard. "It means a new beginning," she answered. "A chance for two worlds to truly come together." News travels fast, even across space. On Earth, Captain Hyun sat in a meeting room at the Space Command Center. Officials talked about trade with the Kirin. Hyun tried to listen, but his mind kept returning to Princess Juwu. 7 months had passed since he left Kirin Prime. 7 months without a word from her. "Captain Hyun," said General Park, "you seem distracted today." "I'm sorry, General," Hyun said. "Please continue." Just then, an aide rushed into the room and handed the general a message. The general read it, his eyes growing wide. "This meeting is over," he said. "Except for you, Captain Hyun. You need to stay." When everyone else had left, General Park handed Hyun the message. "Read this." Hyun looked at the paper. It was from the Kirin royal scientist, Dojin. It talked about a breakthrough in cross-species compatibility and a successful human-Kirin hybrid birth. Hyun's hands began to shake. Does this mean? "It seems Princess Juwu had a baby," the general said. "Your baby." Hyun sat down hard. "I didn't know. They sent her away before I left. They wouldn't let me see her." General Park studied him. "The Kirin King has requested a scientific delegation to study this development. You will lead it." "When do we leave?" Hyun asked, already standing up. "Tomorrow," the general said. "The Kirin have sent a fast ship." The journey to Kirin Prime took 2 weeks. Hyun barely slept. He had a child with Juwu, a child he had never seen. When they arrived, the reception was cold. Royal guards met them, not Juwu. They were taken to guest quarters in the palace. "The king will see you tomorrow," a guard told Hyun. "Until then, stay here." That night, Hyun paced his room, so close to Juwu and his child, yet still kept away. A soft knock at his door made him jump. He opened it to find Sunwoo, the royal guard who had watched him and Juwu in the gardens all those months ago. "Captain Hyun," Sunwoo said quietly. "Come with me. Someone wants to see you." Hyun followed Sunwoo through dark corridors. They came to a small garden lit only by the 3 moons. There, standing under a tree, was Juwu, and in her arms, a small bundle. "Juwu," Hyun whispered. She turned, her face lighting up with joy. "Hyun." He ran to her. They embraced carefully, mindful of the baby between them. "Is this?" Hyun couldn't finish the question. "Your son," Juwu said. "Our son. His name is Shunho." Hyun looked down at the baby. Shunho was awake, looking up at him with curious eyes that seemed to shift between brown and silver in the moonlight. Small patches of scales glittered on his temples. "He's beautiful," Hyun said, his voice breaking. "May I hold him?" Juwu placed Shunho in his arms. The baby reached up and touched Hyun's face, as if he knew who this stranger was. "I would have come sooner if I had known," Hyun said. "My father wouldn't let me send messages," Juwu explained. "It was Dojin who finally managed to get word to Earth through science channels." "How has your father taken this?" Hyun asked. "He's confused," Juwu said. "Angry, but also curious. The court is divided. Some think Shunho is a miracle. Others call him other things." "And what do you think?" Hyun asked. "I think he is perfect," Juwu said simply. "And I think he is the future." The next day, Hyun and his team met with King Tao. The throne room was divided. On one side stood those who supported Juwu and Shunho, Dojin, Minji, Sunwoo, and a growing number of younger Kirin. On the other side were the traditionalists, led by cousin Junseo. "Captain Hyun," the king said, "you have returned to our world under unusual circumstances." "I've come to see my son," Hyun said boldly, "and to offer any help I can." The king's eyes narrowed. "Your son is half Kirin, royal Kirin. He belongs here. He is also half human," Hyun replied. He belongs to both worlds. Juncio stepped forward. This alien has polluted the royal bloodline. The hybrid should not be recognized. Dojin countered, the hybrid may be the key to both our species' future. My study showed Chunho has strengths from both human and Kirin DNA. He might be stronger than either. As they argued, Ju entered with Chunho in her arms. The baby had grown in the weeks since Hyun first saw him. He was alert, watching everything with bright eyes. All talk stopped as Ju walked to the center of the room. Chunho looked around at all the faces, then did something amazing. He smiled, a human expression on his partly Kirin face. Many of the Kirin gasped. Their young did not smile so early. This is the future, Ju said clearly. Not just of the royal line, but of both our peoples. Hyun moved to stand beside her and his son. Together, he said, we can build something new. Kim Tae-ho watched them, his daughter, the human, and the child who carried his bloodline, into a new age. His decision would change everything. For 3 days, King Tae-ho locked himself away. No one was allowed to see him, not even Ju. The palace waited in tense silence for his decision. Would he accept Chunho as his heir, or would he reject the half-human child and choose cousin Juncio instead? Ju and Hyun spent these days together with their son. They walked in the gardens, played in Ju's rooms, and talked about their future. What if your father chooses Juncio? Hyun asked quietly as they watched Chunho crawl faster than any human baby could. Then we will leave, Ju said firmly. We will go to Earth, or to a new world. But we will stay together. Junho pulled himself up on a chair and took a shaky step. Another step. Then he was walking, much earlier than either Kirin or human babies normally would. He's amazing, Hyun said, watching their son. The best of both worlds, Ju agreed. Meanwhile, Dojin worked day and night in his lab. He studied Chunho's DNA, comparing it to both human and Kirin patterns. What he found excited him deeply. On the morning of the 4th day, King Tae-ho called the entire court together. Everyone waited as he entered and sat on his throne. Bring the child, he ordered. Ju and Hyun came forward with Chunho. At 8 months old, he already looked like a 1-year-old human child. He wore a small royal outfit with the Kirin royal symbol on it. Place him before me, the king said. Ju carefully set Chunho down on the floor. The baby looked up at his grandfather without fear. To everyone's surprise, King Tae-ho stepped down from his throne and knelt before the child. Chunho reached out and touched the king's face with a small hand that had tiny scales on the fingertips. I have made my decision, King Tae-ho announced, rising. After much thought and prayer to our ancestors, the court held its breath. Cousin Juncio leaned forward, his face hopeful. The child Chunho, son of Princess Ju and Captain Hyun, shall be my heir, the king declared. Gasps filled the room. Juncio's face twisted with rage. This is madness, he shouted. A half-breed cannot rule the Kirin. Silence, the king roared. Then, more calmly, Scientist Dojin, tell the court what you have discovered. Dojin stepped forward with his tablet. My studies show that Chunho's mixed heritage gives him unique advantages. His Kirin DNA provides strength and long life. His human DNA adds adaptability and quick healing. Together, they make him stronger than either species alone. The king nodded. Our world is changing. The stars are filled with different peoples. We must adapt or die. This child, he pointed to Chunho, who was now standing and watching the proceedings with bright eyes, is the future. And what of us? Asked an older Kirin noble. What of pure Kirin blood? We will not lose our ways, the king assured them, but we will grow. As Chunho grows, he will learn both human and Kirin ways. He will be a bridge between our worlds. The king turned to Ju and Hyun. Until Chunho comes of age, you will both rule as regents. Princess Ju will teach him Kirin ways. Captain Hyun will teach him human ways. Hyun bowed. I am honored, Your Majesty. But my home is Earth. Not anymore, the king said. Your home is here now with your family, but you will be our bridge to Earth as well, our ambassador. In the days that followed, news spread across both worlds. Some Kirin protested the king's decision. Some humans feared closer ties with the alien species, but many on both sides saw the wisdom in King Taho's choice. 1 year later, Juwoo and Hyun stood on a balcony of the palace. Below them, Kirin and human officials mingled at a feast celebrating the new trade agreement. Did you ever imagine this? Hyun asked, taking Juwoo's hand. Never, she admitted. I thought I was barren, useless. And now you're the mother of a new dynasty, Hyun said. Shunho ran to them, now looking like a 3-year-old, though not yet 2. Mother, father, grandfather is asking for us. As they followed their son, Juwoo thought about how far they had come. From outcast princess to mother of the Heir, from separate worlds to a shared future. The alien king had been stunned, but in his surprise, he had found wisdom. And in that wisdom, 2 worlds found hope. The end.